Welcome guys, Jamie McIntyre here, founder of AustralianNationalReview.com and 20th Century Education amongst other things. I'm also a best-selling author of over a dozen books, but really what I want to talk to you today about as an Australian, as a concerned Australian, I think it's good that we obviously share our opinions or have political views on things, but we have a lot of issues going on in the country, particularly about the coronavirus, and I really want to put I'm sure like many of you, sick of the conspiracy theories being pushed by mainstream media, the amount of lies that are being told by mainstream media and our governments, particularly Dan Andrews in Victoria, certainly exceeds the truth about what we're being told. And how can governments and the mainstream media expect fellow Australians to have faith in our institutions and our media if we're continually being lied to? So I'm going to call bullshit on it, bullshit on Dan Andrews and our governments, and bullshit on mainstream media, and put up or shut up. And here's a simple challenge. I'm going to put $1 million up in assets to challenge any TV presenter, any journalist in Australia, any politician in Australia to show, and if you want to put up $1 million too, it's an easy $1 million you can make if you're telling the truth. But I'm putting up $1 million because I'm challenging the media and I'm challenging our governments that you're lying to us about the coronavirus. So here's the challenge. If your conspiracy theories that all these people are dying around the world, including in Australia, from COVID-19 or the coronavirus, then prove it. Because here's my challenge. I can tell you now that you're lying to us. The amount of people that you tell us every day, you're adding up the new global sport death tally, people that are dying overseas and in Australia, is false, it's a lie, and it's deceit. Yes, there's people dying. But yes, there's people that die every year, every day. We don't normally track the deaths around the world like a new global sport. We're not that sadistic normally, but now we are. And it's like, yes, people die every year of the flu. In fact, the coronavirus has been around for decades. Why are we now forced this year to call it a virus? We're not allowed to call it a flu. Well, it's not a flu. It's like, well, it was a flu last year. It was a flu the year before. Oh, no, it's a novel coronavirus. Well, let's not get into all that, whether it's novel or isn't novel. It's irrelevant. The point is, why are you lying to us about how many people have died of COVID in Australia? What are we up to, 200 odd deaths? Well, that's not true. For many of us, we started to question and research and look for evidence of the mainstream media conspiracies that they push every day. Like, they like to label any alternative narrative as conspiracy theory. Great. But here's what I say to fellow Australians if you are not awake yet. You don't earn the right to question alternative theories until you first question what Channel 7 News or Channel 9 or ABC or Fairfax Media and the bullshit, or overseas CNN, Washington Post, etc. You must first question the conspiracy theories pushed by mainstream media that they're actually true. We must demand evidence that they're true. So when you do that, then we earn the right to critically think, or we become critical thinkers. But here's the problem in our society. We've gone to school, we're taught conformity, we're taught to obey authority. But here's my challenge to Australians. We're no longer kids. Grow up. We're adults. Therefore, you're allowed to critically think. You're allowed to ask questions. And I'm challenged any Australian TV presenter, any journalist in this country, any politician in Australia, I dare you to show independent proof that the figures you're telling us about the people that are dying of COVID are actually dying of COVID. Because I'm saying many of them are not dying of COVID. You're deliberately inflating the deaths and counting flu deaths. Notice how around the world the flu deaths almost disappeared in 2020. Anyone that can soon figure it out, it's just reclassification of death, of flu, or anything else. Get run over by a bus in Melbourne, or by a tram. You won't be run over by a tram. Sorry, no, you died of COVID. Dare you, you're going to try and die of something other than COVID in the world right now. We know it's absolute lies and deceit. Why? Now, I have my suspicions and a lot of evidence of why you're doing it, but let's ask you why. So here's my challenge. I'm not into conspiracy theories. I want to see evidence and fact before I believe something. We can speculate, but right now, the mainstream media is pushing conspiracy theories daily about the death tally and also about cases. Cases are heavily inflated. The test kits for cases aren't even meant to be used for that. They're not accurate. It doesn't show if you had the flu before or previous coronaviruses will show up that you're positive. And cases don't mean anything. Normally, you would just track how many people are sick. If 500 people today in Victoria show up, test positive, Why is that even news? Last year, you didn't care how many people got the flu. Last year, you didn't care. Did you care how many people got the flu today in Australia? No. Care how many people passed on the flu to someone else? No. No, but it's a coronavirus. Well, last year was the flu. Coronavirus was the flu. How come this year is just a virus? But let's forget about the cases and the falsified. Of course, if you test more and more people deliberately, you're going to be able to show cases go up. If the news reported accurately and said, well, out of 500 cases, the margin of error is so great that it's unscientific, first of all, and two, false positives are through the roof. And if you had the flu before, you can show up positive. But only about 0.26% of those people show symptoms or mean they're actually sick. So since when, before the coronavirus, we never counted people sick that aren't sick? 0.26%. So 500 cases mean about 1 person to 2 people might be sick. So imagine the news headlines in Victoria. Today, 1 person was sick from a flu, and it's really serious. But the good news is there is effective treatments. And why is the government, Dan Andrews and the media trying to stop effective treatments like hydroxychloroquine and zinc and other things being used? 1 person's sick and we can easily treat them unless they're already sick and dying in an aged care home of cancer and other things, and we want to relabel them as coronavirus deaths and get incentives from that. You know, people don't know in the US, $39,000 to be listed as dying of COVID if you put on a ventilator. Guess what ventilators do? Kill most people. Ventilators should never be used, according to doctors, to treat this. So my point is, we're being lied to. The deaths are inflated. 88% of people in Italy, National Health Institute of Italy, did this assessment months ago. Why isn't this all over mainstream media? That the deaths they said all died in Italy, which really scared us in the beginning, remember, outside of China. 88% recorded deaths did not die of COVID. They had 2, 3, 4 or more comorbidities. They're already dying, folks. And the 12% required further investigation. This is a fraud. It's a falsified pandemic. I can go into all the evidence to provide that. It's all over my Facebook. I'm not the only one speaking out. I call bullshit on Dan Andrews. I call bullshit on our government. And I say, I put my money where my mouth is. Here's $1 million. Anyone, Australian government, any politician, TV presenter or journalist, prove to me independently that the coronavirus tallies in Australia that you're pushing on everyone to cause lockdowns and scare people in Australia are true and can be backed up with evidence. Because I'm saying they're inflated. They deliberately inflate it, just like the cases are inaccurate and the cases are done to scare people. You don't talk about how many people are sick because not enough people are getting sick. That's why you don't talk about cases. Folks, this is a falsified pandemic under the definitions of 2010 of WHO, the World Health Organization. This would not qualify as a pandemic. And not saying people aren't sick, not saying people aren't dying, but people get sick and die every day. They did in 2019, they did 2018, and they're going to continue to die. Why do we shut down economies? And how many people are dying already in Victoria of committing suicide? How many are going to commit suicide? Estimated 7,500 extra Australians will commit suicide over the next 5 years from these unnecessary lockdowns. Lockdowns, even if it was a deadly virus that was going to wipe out heaps of people, lockdowns will still not save us. So the point being, the good news is it's a fraud and that we're not all going to die. And if you haven't figured out that yet, stop believing everything the TV tells you. I'm not saying to believe me or believe anything else. I'm telling you to critically think, stop being a sheep, because about 40% of the Australian population, I believe, is already woken up, which is great news. It used to only be about 10, 15% of people on the planet in this country that were awake, that knew the news media was bullshit. Now I think it's about 40%. We need to get 50% plus, because the politicians play to the lowest common denominator, the most uneducated people. I don't mean academic educated, because, I mean people that believe what's on the news to be true. They don't realize that's propaganda. It's deceit. Pharmaceutical companies are one of their biggest advertisers. So there's vested interest. They lie to you. There is nothing pretty much on news that's the truth. You're being lied to. But hey, don't believe me? $1 million. I'm putting $1 million on the line. Journalists in Australia, TV presenter or politician, prove to me that the COVID death tallies you're telling daily can be backed up with evidence. I'm saying they deliberately inflate it. Many of these people are dying of cancer, of flus, of other things, and it's no big deal. We should not be committing economic suicide. And I would suggest this to Australians: start considering Plan B. Don't take it just because grew up in peaceful times. Many of us other than our parents or maybe grandparents have gone through wartime, do not assume that the world is always going to be the way it is in Australia, that's always peaceful. America could be in civil war by November. They can't stand a democratic elected president. They will do anything. They'll destroy their own country, the Democrats, out of spite and out of the fact that Clintons, etc., are in bed with China. This is an attempted globalist takeover with communism. Don't believe me? Go and do your research. If you think what Channel 7 is telling you is the truth, then you're an idiot. I'm sorry. And idiots are going to lead you off the cliff. Australians, we must wake up. We need a majority of people to see the truth. Otherwise, they'll keep playing to the dumbasses, the people that just think what the news is telling them is true, and they'll vote for them, and we are screwed. I'm telling you, consider Plan B. Plan B is worst case scenario. If our governments fall, as they may in America by November, you need to have a Plan B. It's not hard to take over this country. All China or someone would have to do is affect the distribution supplies to Coles and Woolworths and cities of Melbourne with 5 or 6 million people and Sydney, etc. If Woolworths and Coles could not get food on the shelves, those cities would crumble within 2 weeks. People would be starving. And where are they going to go? They're going to go out in the country after food, etc. They don't need weapons and an army to take over our countries these days. It's a silent war, and the war is getting dangerous. Our politicians, many of them are infiltrated by foreign assets, foreign intelligence agencies, deep state. Sounds like a conspiracy theory, but folks, what's on the news is also conspiracy theory. We need to check out the evidence. We cannot be complacent. Don't assume the good, safe world we live in, or in Australia at least, and many parts of the world are not safe, is going to always be this way. You need to consider Plan B, worst case scenario. If the Australian government does not represent the Australian people or the state premiers, then they need to be removed. Now, we need to remove them by a referendum or an election, or if things get really bad, we have to start looking at Plan B. We don't want to have to focus on there. We want to be able to change it, but you don't want to be like some people in history that left it too late when they had no ability to defend themselves. The world is becoming a very dangerous place. I think it's going to get much worse before it gets better. On the other side of this, the world can be amazing. If we get rid of the cabal, the criminal organizations that try and run this world and abuse our democracies and abuse our institutions, then the world can become a better place. But there's a fight going on right now. We're at war. And if you think Channel 7 is going to tell you the truth, or Channel 9, then you're going to do a disservice to your country. Don't rely on other people to fight for your freedoms and your civil liberties. It's your job to stand up. It's your job to speak out. If you're worried what your friends think, get new friends. If you don't have the balls to be a leader and speak the truth, then you will be judged harshly. We will all be judged. And I can tell you now, history will judge Dan Andrews very harshly. History will judge the TV networks and that are traitors to this country, the TV presenters, the journalists that are lying. And history's going to judge you too. Did you speak out on Facebook and social media and say something's not right? And even in my gut, they're now doing research, you know you're being lied to. If you don't speak up, then you are just like the Nazis in Hitler's reign, to just remain silent. They just watched Hitler do what he did and get away with what he did because they were too gutless to speak up. You must speak up because these politicians are gutless. If we're going to run them out of office and run them out of our country, they will listen to us. But if you're too scared to speak up and go, hey, something's not right, you have every right to question the conspiracy theories pushed in mainstream media and demand evidence. I'm demanding evidence right now. Prove to me, politicians, TV journalists, or any journalists and TV presenters, that the COVID tally you're telling us is true and accurate and you can independently verify it. Because we know you can't. You're lying to us.